Let's talk about Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the novelization of the movie, released shortly before the movie was in 1981, similar to like the Star Wars novelization by Alan Dean Foster. Which makes this the first Indiana Jones content ever released to the public, I guess. The novelization was written by Campbell Black, and apparently Lucasfilm only gave him 6 weeks to write this book. And apparently he was only given a copy of the script and like no stills from the movie or the production or anything, so he had to visualize everything by himself. So I'm pretty sure we all know the story of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't really have to talk about that because we all know, and this book, it's the same. It follows the same structure, the same scenes are in here for the most part. Obviously this is based on an earlier version of the script, some things changed during filming and everything. So yeah, we got some changes in here and some extra chapters, which is always interesting. The biggest thing to note is obviously we get extra chapters regarding Belloq. And the German Dietrich, who's like kind of in charge of the operation, how he's ordered to like work with Belloq, to get the Ark. We get their POVs, which is interesting, and expands a bit on like the villains, which is nice, especially for Belloq as a character. I can definitely see why those scenes aren't in the movie, because they would just slow down the pacing, and they are kind of unnecessary, but I do appreciate it. We even get some POV parts written from the perspective of the monkey, the Nazi monkey, which is pretty funny. Now, other stuff that was added in by Campbell Black with no, supervision from Lucasfilm, because they didn't tell him, anything. So Black came up with his own little backstories for Indy and Belloq and, some of the stuff. He gives a reason why Indy is using a whip, because apparently at one point Indy just thinks, he has been fascinated by whips ever since going to, the circus when he was a little kid, and he saw the performers with the tigers and, the whip. That doesn't necessarily contradict, Last Crusade, which, sets up how Indy became Indy in the span of 5 minutes in one summer day. It's fine, I appreciate it, I appreciate the effort. And talking about the whip, we also have to talk about Indy's head, which I don't think got a backstory, but it's interesting because Indy mentions it's his lucky head, and in the climax of the book, he loses it. Completely, it's just gone, and he doesn't get it back. He also loses the whip, which I honestly kind of like, because obviously in the movie it's a thing he always, gets his head back, because Indy's character is pretty much only the head anyway, but here he loses, his stuff, his head, his whip, it's all gone by the end. He's stripped of all his, classical, items, his adventure gear, and I honestly like it, just because it's the climax, and it kind of shows, shit's getting real. We also get a little bit more on the backstory between Marion and Indy, which is creepy as fuck, thanks to orders by George Lucas. I was wrong, because I assumed she was 14, he was 27. Turns out she was 15, he was 28. That doesn't really make it better. What's also not good is the romantic scenes, because Indy keeps thinking, she's a woman now, she's not a child anymore. And there's a really creepy scene when she's basically naked and he sees her breasts and he's thinking about how they are not a little girl's breasts anymore, which is fucking George Lucas, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah, sure, Campbell Black wrote this. I guess I also have to blame him, but this was on orders of George Lucas. He wanted pedo Indy. There's some deleted scenes in here. Most notably, the one that stuck out to me is the scene where Indy is at home with a female student, which is something they cut because they didn't want to make Indy a complete James Bond ripoff. It's interesting that it's in here, but I prefer the way it's handled in the movies. Now for the backstory with Belloq, it's interesting because Belloq at one point mentions he and Indy studied together, and Indy is thinking of 2 previous encounters where Belloq just fucked him over. It's not big adventurous stuff, it's just little things where Belloq was a prick. But it's interesting, because the first meeting between Indy and Belloq was supposed to be shown in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, but the show got cancelled before those episodes could be made, and so later material established different things. Like in the later Bantam novels of the 1990s, Max McCoy in his novel Indiana Jones and the Dinosaur Eggs established Indy and Belloq first meeting in 1933, I think. That has been retconned by, I think, James Luceno in his reference book that came out during the times of Crystal Skull, because it's established they first met in 1922. But that meeting was never depicted in any media. Another small change regarding Belloq, he's like extremely sexually attractive to women, apparently, because Marion in this book, like, she really wants to fuck him, and it's weird. It's weird as all hell, but okay, there we go. But in total, this is a good adaptation. If you like the movie, you know, the book, it's pretty much the same. It has some neat extras. Indy's character is expanded upon. It's decent. It's a very decent book. I enjoyed it. It's also short, which helps with the fast pacing, and I just miss when books were this short. This book is like 190 pages or something. So in conclusion, I would definitely recommend Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's a good novelization. It's a good, fun book. If you're in the mood for Indiana Jones, but maybe you want to read something instead of rewatching the movies, yeah, you can try this out.